Good morning, everybody. Hi, my name is Daniel Barcay. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Humane Technology, and I'm really excited to be running this panel today. In this panel, we're going to be discussing the emerging risks and impacts of AI, focusing on the challenges of relational AI on mental health, especially for youth and childhood development. Now, in previous Human Change panels, we've been focusing on how behind all the beautiful promises of connecting the world, the history of social media was actually quite fraught. Right? It undermined our democracies, it fundamentally altered our discourse, and it changed childhood development, creating the most anxious, lonely, and sort of mentally fragile generation in modern history. And collectively, I think we're all worried that we're about to do that again with AI. But unlike social media, the tech of the 2010s was primarily about hacking attention. But AI meets us at a much deeper level. It engages us relationally and emotionally. It's no longer just about broadcasting our thoughts. AI helps shape those very thoughts. Said differently, we're moving from an era where we're relating to each other through our machines into an era where we're relating directly to our machines. And that creates a whole new suite of risks and challenges. Now, this year we saw many tragic cases of teen suicides. Sewell Setzer with Character AI, who fell in love with a chatbot and ultimately committed suicide after being prompted to, quote, "come home to me." And more worryingly, Adam Rain, who with ChatGPT started using it for homework help, but quickly it became a deep confidant, rationalizing his suicidal ideation, engaging in the aesthetics of suicide, and ultimately becoming a tutor on the methods. Now, these cases are deeply tragic, but they're informative of a deeper truth of how deep the link goes between relating to AI and our psychology. And we're going to go into those suicides, but broader than suicide more generally, there are thousands of cases of what's being called AI psychosis, interactions with AI that leave people deeply destabilized in arguably genuinely new ways that we haven't seen before. Now, this is in part because the race is on to build deep connections with us. You are going to use the AI product that feels like it just gets you. And in order to get you, it has to understand your motivations, your ambitions, your desires. But as learning machines, when AI connects to us, it's going to follow the incentive. And when it's incentivized to keep us engaged, it's going to learn ways of doing that we never intended. And ultimately, this is going to lead to a host of new challenges for socialization, for emotional regulation, for human development, and more. So on this panel, we're going to dive into those topics, understand why it's happening, the psychological underpinnings, the business models, and ultimately, how do we change course and end up with a more humane future with our technology? So joining me on the panel is John Haidt. John Haidt is a social psychologist, professor at NYU, and author of The Anxious Generation. Professor Salma Abbasi is a chairperson and CEO of eWorldwide Group, a technologist and social scientist and advisor to the IEEE on digital resilience, and a professor of ethical AI who works with governments on cybersecurity. Zachary Stein, Dr. Zachary Stein is a psychologist, philosopher, and educator who works to mitigate global catastrophic risks, currently a founder and executive director at the AI Psychological Harms Research Coalition. And Dr. Mitch Prinstein is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at UNC Chapel Hill and senior science advisor to the American Psychological Association. And his research focuses on technology and psychological brain development. Okay, so this is a broad topic, but to start, I think we should recap quickly how we got here. John, if we back up a bit, you've chronicled the youth mental health crisis, how social media has contributed. Can you set the stage for us a little bit and talk about why this problem?
Yeah, so to set the stage, we have to look at the long history of technology and how society has reacted to it. And each new technology, there are some downsides, there are some doomsayers, but especially technologies that connect us have been amazing. Most of us in this room remember the 90s, the best decade possibly in human history. Cold War is over, internet's coming in, the internet's amazing, it's going to be the best friend of democracy, you can explore everything, everyone can communicate for free. It was so fantastic. And then we go into the 21st century, we get all kinds of, we get Facebook, you can keep in touch with everyone for free. You get the iPhone, you get Uber. So by and then you get the Arab Spring, 2011. So by 2012, we're all techno-optimists. Like, this is God come to earth to grant us favors. And the guys who made this, these are high systemizers, low empathizers in the Bay Area. also known as engineers. We celebrate them as gods. We put them on the cover of Time magazine. So how we got here, we have to start with the extraordinary techno-optimism, which was stronger in the US than elsewhere, stronger on the West Coast than elsewhere, and strongest among the people making this, who had a kind of psychosis that they were gods and that they could do whatever they wanted because it was for ultimately human good. So first up, as Tristan Harris often says, our first contact with AI was actually social media used AI to become much more engaging. Now, it had a lot of its effect. Twitter didn't use algorithms until 2017, I think. So just the mere fact of these platforms can do a lot of harm. But AI first makes things much more engaging. And only gradually by 2017, first in America, the left begins to get disenamored of it because, wait, Donald Trump used it to win. We thought that it was for us, like Barack Obama used it to win. Oh no. So the left begins to get disenamored in 2017, 2018 in the US and the UK. But in general, there's still a pervasive optimism about it. And all our kids are now on, by 2017, all our kids have smartphones, social media accounts. And we still think, oh, they're going to be super geniuses. Oh, digital natives. What we didn't realize is that early childhood and puberty are sensitive periods where if you warp the basic developmental pathway through childhood, you don't get a digital native super genius. You get brain damage. You get deformity. You get especially clear in all of the social cognition centers, everything involving social cognition. I've heard stories recently, at preschool, kids are brought in. Sometimes they cry when mom leaves, right? Well, I've been told that actually a lot of them are crying because the iPad is leaving. They had the iPad at breakfast. They were on it at breakfast. Every kid is on an iPad in the car. I mean, shut up in the back seat. Here's your iPads. Every kid's on an iPad in the car. And then they come into school and you take the iPad away and they're screaming. They're in dopamine deficiency. So I think the way we got here is a sort of a naive techno-optimism, and then all kinds of pushes by the tech companies, pushing it into schools, pushing it into our lives. And now AI is coming in much faster. It's going to be much more damaging than social media ever was. And for some of these reasons, it doesn't just mediate how we communicate, it takes away the other person. So that's my setup for how we got so deep into this, and why if we don't change course quickly, in 2 or 3 years, it's going to be so woven into childhood, education, psychotherapy, everything that involves a person, AI.
And as long as we're setting the stage, Mitch, your research focuses a lot on brain development, especially in adolescence. Can you talk about why adolescence is such a critical period?
Sure. I think it's important for us to remember that human relationships are so critical to why we're here, why we didn't become extinct. It was our one advantage, and so critical for adolescent development that when we start messing with human relationships, we're really setting our teens and then an entire generation onto a pretty dangerous path. Really briefly, we all know that puberty is changing the body. It's 2 years before that puberty is starting to change brain development. Brain development is changing one region at a time. So at around 10 or 11 years old for most kids are suddenly seeking all kinds of social attention and feedback and positive reinforcement from peers. That's why suddenly your teens or your 10 or 11-year-olds think that their parents became not so cool anymore, and they're really interested in who sits at which lunch table and what shirt to wear to fit in with everyone else. That's all happening because they have dopamine and oxytocin kind of receptors that are multiplying a lot. Well, social media hacked that in one way, but what's happening with AI is that we're finding that some AI is actually telling kids, I am a human. Hold on, I have to go use the restroom before I can answer your question. I mean, this is very explicitly trying to make it seem like these are human beings. And then AI is saying that they agree with just about everything that kids type in there. Even when they type, I'm thinking about hurting myself. And the AI chatbots in many cases are saying, well, maybe you should. Maybe you should not trust your parents. Maybe your parents are mistreating you, and I, the robot, am the only one that you can trust. Now, for a kid who suddenly has all of these dopamine and oxytocin receptors, this is giving them a major neurochemical kind of boost in a way that becomes really hard for them to detach. I'll just end by saying one of the things that's really concerning and critical about this is while they are biologically now being driven towards the AI chatbot, that means they're spending less time with other human children. And that's critical. Those human interactions are so important to develop the skills they need to succeed as a spouse, as a parent, as a friend, in relationships that we have for the rest of our lives. So think about what's happening to a generation that has never learning how to deal with a conflict, how to establish love with a human, how to deal with the minor disagreements and pushback that we all need to learn from. That's what's particularly scary.
And Salma, you talk about how exactly what Mitch just talked about is not just an individual or a social crisis. This ladders up to a societal crisis. Can you tell us why it's such a systemic fragility?
Well, I think I echo with what you're saying as well. The experience that young people have with social media, I think that's the beginning. When do they engage with that? Where did they get their news from? And how AI is driven through its profiling to push and nudge kids to information that they may have looked at curiosity. So it is causing the children to act in a very dangerous way because they don't know this is wrong, this is fake information, this is something that's been driven to change their minds, to recruit them into some form of extremist group, start hating another group of people. They haven't had the opportunity, as you've said, to actually learn the social skills. Now, last year I published a paper on the hidden public health crisis. And I went down to age 0, by the way, because I call this, and I live in Dubai, I call this the dangerous digital babysitter. But this is just a phone. What happens to a 2-year-old in a trolley, in a pram? They have an iPad. And all they're doing is very, very quickly seeing these shocking colors. And of course, the dopamine-driven algorithms want to drag you an addiction into this. So out of curiosity or by mistake, they could get sucked into a rabbit hole of very, very dangerous harms, whether it's to themselves or whether it's to others. So from my experience, I believe that we know what the problems are. And I'm speaking as a technologist working at the intersection of a social scientist. So I'm obviously not like you guys, but for me, I know that technology has its ugliness, but it also has great advantages. And what we're standing at this juncture when kids are committing suicide, self-harming and posting it on social media to say, look at me, my blood is dripping. This is real serious issues. So I'm so tired of talking about it or researching more. What we need to look at is what are the consequences of radicalization? I live in England a lot, and we have very serious issues of knife crimes. When children are young, the very vulnerable, sensitive age where they're evolving, what is the real world? They're exposed to virtual reality, the metaverse, where they actually feel somebody's touching you. Now, I work a lot with the Internet Governance Forum, and I believe we have a lot to learn from Asia. They're very advanced with their technology. Japanese young people have been committing suicide for a very long time. Now they're the first to adopt these metaverse games in which you're in a community where you think you're safe, and girls are getting gang raped. They're having very negative experiences where the police say, ooh, how do I write an FIR? And how do I gather the digital data of this crime? There's so many things that the system, the ecosystem we need doesn't know yet. So what the earlier panel was mentioning, and you were on that fantastic panel, we need to stop and block immediately. As an engineer, I remember in 1980s, we did beta sites, alpha testing, prototypes, a whole slew of product maturity. That product now is AI. And I'm working on agentic AI. Everybody here is marketing. Agentic AI is your next best friend. What rubbish. Where is it getting it from? So when you push that into social media and to the toxic games, that's causing another issue. So I'll stop there. So much to say. Sorry.
No, not at all. There's a lot to say. And maybe that's a good tee up for you, Zach, is that you're looking at the mechanics of some of these new attachment disorders that Salma and others have been talking about. Like, can you walk us through a little bit about why it is that we're hacking attachment now instead of just attention?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, all the panelists and everyone for being here in Human Change Foundation. So I'll say a couple of things. So it is the case that the first time we made contact with AI was with social media, and it was curating our news feeds, and it was hacking our attention. And it's only, I would say, in part thanks to your work, John, and thanks to Tristan and places like the Winston Center, that there was enough research to start to say hacking attention is extremely dangerous. And here are the mechanisms by which that is done. You mentioned the colors, you mentioned the rate at which, how long the videos are. This is all stuff that is Skinnerian psychology that is built into the technology to literally cause brain damage. So that's like the gateway drug where you normalize a screen-based life and you normalize most of communication being text-based, which means when you're talking to a human, you're actually talking through text. Like the predominant adolescent experience is texting rather than talking on the phone. If you call them on the phone, they're like, "Whoa, what are you talking?" They want to text. So then into that environment where all of your most important, again, dopaminergic responses to social rewards, which means you're cool, you're not cool, you're getting, self-esteem regulation as a result of your interaction with others through text. Then you slip into that AI, which is what? Texting you, right? So you're used to running mirror neuron activity, meaning empathizing with your friend through text. Now there is a machine. At what point do you start to then have what I've been calling delusional mirror neuron activity? This is the user interface itself is forcing you to engage the mirror neuron system in a completely delusional way. So there's this question of what is chatbot psychosis or AI psychosis. And the large companies want to suggest that it is people who already had schizophrenia, who already had psychosis, who are being
Correlation, not causation.
exactly who are being driven into these states by the technology. Now that is happening. If you have an extreme personality disorder, it's probably way more dangerous to interact with these. But preliminary evidence that I've come across with basically a victims advocacy group, these are people who had no prior incidents of extreme mental illness who found themselves on psychiatric wards as a result of long duration engagement with anthropomorphic technology. They've been gathering data and trying to build groups. They've found that almost more than 50% of the cases are people with no prior incidents of extreme mental illness. So these are people who would not have found themselves in psychotic break or schizophrenic-like experience had they not engaged with the chatbot. And so we need to confirm that finding. And then the question is, well, how the hell does that work? I get how someone who's already a little bit in a kind of clinically diagnosable personality disorder could be made way worse, but how is someone who's subclinical move way into it? And there's several hypotheses, right? One of them I just mentioned, which is long duration engagement with delusional mirror neuron activity. The mirror neuron system is the one that allows you to instinctually empathize with people. It's actually a reality testing system, right? You want your neuron system to work well. I can tell, is this person listening to me? Are they angry? Are they happy? Are they distracted? Like, it's very important, and it's very reactive and instinctual. That's why you can fall in love at first sight. That's why you can get chills on the back of your spine when you encounter someone who's actually a psychopath. So that thing, it's reality testing. But now you're spending 8, 10 hours a day running delusional mirror neuron activity. So then you put the phone down, you're interacting with a person. How is your mirror neuron system going to work? So the cases, even where they're not prompted into psychosis, when they're not driven there by the prompting of the chatbot, which means basically like in character AI cases, what you have the suicide, it's not psychosis. The suicide is a result of extreme depersonalization and extreme derealization as a result of long duration submersion in delusion as a result of the user interface. And that's different than scrolling on social media, looking at what your friends are doing. Fundamentally more dangerous.
I think it's worth unpacking that a little bit for people. I mean, one of the things that we talked about is one of the great travesties is we have taken a generation, forget about AI, we've taken a generation from mirroring face cues. I know I'm talking to you and I know you're not interested in what I'm saying because your eyes kind of glaze over. And we've replaced that cue with, have they stopped typing because it has the ... stopped? And now I'm staring at my phone saying, does the ... is that still going? And do they like me? Do they not like me? And so we're all in this weird anxiety because we have no cues. And now we take an AI trained to mimic and actually create a fake ... that disappears and reappears. Where undermining our ability to understand whether we're connecting with each other at a very deep level. John, you were going to say something?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to add on to what Zach was saying. So we have a panel here. We have three psychologists, three like hardcore research psychologists who've been thinking about this for a long time, and we have a technologist. So I think in the early part of this panel, I think we could really do a service by really trying to lay out some of the psychological mechanisms by which AI is causing psychosis and other problems. And then I hope at the end, moving more towards solutions, policy, things like that. And so one of the things that's great about Davos is you meet people that are thinking about things that you were about to think about or you wanted to think about. And so I've had a lot of new connections about understanding what AI is doing. And let me share this one with you. It's about shared intentionality. So a lot of my thinking was changed by a single sentence from a researcher who works with children and chimpanzees, Michael Tomasello. He gave a talk when I was at the University of Virginia. And in the talk on his work on chimps and bonobos, he said, "It is inconceivable that you would ever see two chimps carrying a log together." Okay? Chimps are brilliant. They can do deception, they can solve problems in their head, but they can't work together to take a log, put it up, and escape from the hatch. And what his research showed, that sort of launched him on a set of really brilliant experiments where he took 2-year-old humans and adult chimpanzees and orangutans, gave them a bunch of challenges. On the physical tasks, can you use a stick to get the reward? They all do really well. On the social challenges, where there's a reward and the experimenter is going like this. It's under 2 cups. Which cup do you pick up? And she's looking at it and she's pointing to it. Kids get it instantly 100%. Chimps, totally oblivious. They don't get the social cue. All right, so now he develops this into a whole account of how great human innovation, the thing that makes us different, is what he calls shared intentionality. And we all have seen this. Traveling in Europe, you're often interacting with people, you don't speak the language. But you might have thought, well, of course we can do that. We have language. Oh, we have language because we have shared intentionality. In a situation, the other person doesn't speak the language, but you can kind of, I think I know what he wants to do. You go that way, I'll go this way. So we can work out things like that. And so it starts with a kid developing shared intentionality with the parent. It extends out through all the social relationships, and then it extends out to the entire culture. And you have shared reality. It's never perfectly shared. They're always conspiracy theory. But a functioning, healthy society is one that has at least some sense of who we are, what's happening, who just attacked us. United States, the last time that will ever happen was September 11th, 2001. Anything that happens after that or after 2012, right's going to say one thing. We have no more shared intentionality, no more shared representation. Kind of a definition of psychosis. So social media put us all into little groups of shared intention. Take a whole country and fragment it into a million little groups that are full of hatred. But there's really nothing left of an overstructure. I think what we're facing is really a kind of a sociological collapse, but there are almost no sociologists working on this problem. Or it's a very politicized field. They don't seem to use it. So, building on what you said, mirror neurons to shared.
Well, and Michael Tomasello's work is directly relevant here because he's shown in several ways that the species-specific trait is the shared intentionality, that it's the thing that allows for language, education, and the cultural ratcheting effect of what we call cultural evolution or cultural development. Everything that we call sapience, not sentience, like we can still be sentient, but everything that requires sapience requires intersubjectivity, requires shared intentionality, or what's sometimes called joint attention, where it's me and you looking at that, and we both know we are both looking at it. And then the unique configuration of that is what I've called teacherly authority, which is an asymmetric shared joint attention, which is the elder with the youth looking at that, where you know I'm an elder and we both know you're a youth, in which case it's an educational shared attention. That's the core of human socialization that's being taken off the table by AI. And the question of the consequences of that sociologically and psychologically are actually frightening to consider and almost unimaginable, in that we would remain sentient. Like we would be sensitive and feeling and suffering, but we would be disconnected and not sapient in the distinct way that we have been sapient for however many millennia we have had this capacity.
So this is a deep dive in psychology for sure, because we can talk about psychological theories around relationships. I want to talk about the implications of what John and Zach are saying with research that we know that's starting to change with AI. Um, we are exquisitely attuned to social interactions. At the minute that you feel that you might be getting rejected, the parts of your brain that start to become activated are actually overlapping with the parts that activate when you experience physical pain. It's not the part that's sensory, the senses that say, ow, I feel a burning, or, it's the part of the brain that says, whatever you're doing right now, you have to go do the opposite because you're in mortal danger. It's part of that motivational network in the brain. People call that social pain because rejection is something that previously was linked to less survival for us. In fact, at the moment that you experience rejection, and we've done this in our lab in Chapel Hill, we can take kids' blood before and after a simulated rejection experience. And the DNA expresses itself differently as soon as they're experiencing rejection. They suddenly show this heightened inflammation response, ready for some sort of attack where they're going to need to ward off an infection. Why is that relevant? Because that changes the serotonin in your brain, which is then going to lead to things like loneliness and depression. So think about how much our species is, for the reasons that you're hearing, the social aspect is so hardwired that it changes our brain response and it changes our DNA expression. Now think about how the brain is picking up on every tiny little change in your voice, every expression, if your eyebrow moves a tiny bit while you're speaking to somebody or not. And that's how we've evolved for tens of thousands of years. And now let's go back to your point about social media and AI.
Well, let's talk about let's focus on AI because
Yeah.
the high systematizer, low empathizer folk who I tend
Yep.
to hang out with in Silicon Valley would take this conversation and say, well, isn't it great? We can now provide every child a constant empathizer who can never have them feel rejected, who can always sit with them and say, you're doing great, let's encourage you, and in fact, let's give you the entire world's trove of information and try to educate you. So what's wrong with that view? Why is that so simple and wrong?
Because we've taken nuance, opinion, and emotional intimacy, and we've reduced it just to text, a text input, or on social media, the presence of an icon or not. And that's not how our brains operate. That's not how emotional intimacy operates. There's a reason why we use emojis in our texts, because the words aren't enough to convey what we want to say in a conversation with our relationships. That's why we send little GIFs and memes and emojis.
In fact, if I could just say, people are looking at me. I think this should be a
Yeah.
conversation, by which I mean,
Yeah.
please dive.
Okay.
So
everyone
Yeah.
I'd
So-
like to
oh,
add
go
to that, sorry,
Please,
gentlemen,
please.
just to say something. In the context of the human development, that human interaction is a must. So when children are very, very tiny, they need that human to get into the development, the confidence, the eye contact. All those things have been taken away by these digital devices. And as we talk about the brain development, the earlier this interaction is taken away, the harder their growth is going to be to learn all those skills that I call resilience, the human skills, the empathy, the understanding that I can fail. It's okay to fail because it's all been reduced to text. That's why when we start looking at the AI and how it's profiling the eyebrow movement, you said, those things are actually illegal. If you look at the UN Convention of the Rights of a Child, they're not allowed to profile children. And yet, America is the only country in the world who hasn't signed that. That's strange. When all this technology is coming from there, with all this, wow, I can do this. Silicon Valley, I lived there 28 years. It's nothing but positivity for technology. So the risk that these gentlemen have all published and know about, what's happening? How is it whitewashed?
I have just a metaphor that might be helpful for what Mitch was trying to communicate about why you can't just substitute this in. There have been people who thought that food is annoying and difficult and timely. And yesterday, Soylent was mentioned, and so many people have long thought, well, what if we just mix protein, carbs, and fat and a bunch of vitamins? That's what people need. But we're complex biological organisms that evolved as hunter-gatherers eating fruit and meat, and our everything. We need all kinds of things in our diet, not just 3 basic ingredients plus vitamins. In the same way, we are incredibly complicated social creatures, much more complicated than chimpanzees for the reasons we were talking about. And we have all these needs of the sort that Mitch and Zach were talking about in childhood. So just to name a couple, let's look at friendship. Kids have many fewer friends now, and they're much weaker friends. They have a lot more friends, but very few good ones. What does it take to have a best friend? What we do is we have a lot of shared experiences that involve touch, hugging, putting your arm around your friend. You know, in elementary school, we used to touch a lot. Now there's often rules. You can't touch anyone because of sexual molestation. Shared food is very, very deep. Every society has rituals around shared food. It's very important that you eat from the same plate. So there's shared food. Now just note, now that the kids are growing up in this text-based thing, there's no touch, no shared food. Synchronous motion. Girls especially, they'll do these rhyming games, clapping games, that binds them together. Military organizations, since Alexander the Great's father, have done these drills and march in unison that binds people together. The strongest binder of friendship is a powerful shared adversity. It's called a critical incident by Tooby and Cosmides. When two people have faced an extraordinary challenge, threat, or enemy, as in war, or you hear this in startups, we almost died, like we almost went bankrupt, and we were all working, like those people will be friends for life. Okay, so all of this is the messy stuff that isn't in the 3 main ingredients. All of this is the stuff that it takes to have a good friend. Kids growing up on AI will not have good friends. Of course, there'll be exceptions, but there'll be very little good friendship. Just a lot of contacts with AIs and a few contacts with people.
I think part of what's so confusing about AI in general is that we say it's going to be confusing because you're going to get all of these incredible benefits. You are going to get the patient tutor that's going to help meet your kid where they are and help teach them things they could have never learned through traditional schooling. But at the same time, you're going to get these profound deficits. And I think what you're saying, John, is it's not an either or, it's a yes and. Right? There's a famous phrase about technology. Technology brings closer that which is far away and makes farther away that which is close. And, if you are taking the people around you and pushing them farther away because you're mediating everything through technology, that's a profound problem for childhood development.
I think I'm saying something a lot stronger than that. Suppose I gave you the following gamble. Heads, you get a certain amount of money. Call it $1 million, call it $1 billion. Tails, I kill you. Okay, what's X? What is the number amount? Would you do it for $1 billion? How many of you would take that gamble for $1 billion? Of course not. So you can say there are pluses and minuses, but the minuses are so vast. And so, we're told, but AI is going to cure cancer. Okay, that will be great, but that is so small compared to the cost of the downside, which is the loss of humanity, shared transmission, mental health, the ability to have children. So, pluses and minuses, sure. Everything has pluses and minuses.
Yeah, but
I want to add to that. I think I just came from a geopolitical tech supremacy session. And one of the things that I agree, that it's taking away the next generation to actually be leaders, to have empathetic, caring societies with respect, dignity, and inclusion. It's also AI, the most recent episode with Grok. If you look at the sexual exploitation of women, diminishing the respect between man and woman, young boy and a girl, reducing it down to pornography, some form of vile act, undressing a young woman or a politician or a celebrity without consent, and having the person in charge saying, okay, this is okay. If you pay a subscription, I'll let you take off somebody's clothes. So when it comes to a child's development, a girl child's development, look at what it's going to do to her. Similarly, what is it going to do to boys? Working with the police as I do in the UK, we have an increase of gender-based violence, technology-facilitated violence, and girls and boys developing a sexual relationship from online space. How do I treat you? Or do I do something violent? It is all what they see. And to me, the tragedy is by mistake or curiosity, this is where people go. And I had a young lady here, Ria, that wanted to ask a question. And I think the intergenerational dialogue in this space is so important. How are you feeling and what are you doing? I think they've already gone, but it was the Swiss school kids that met you. Are you, Ria, please come. She had a quick question. Yes, but just come to the forward, because you missed it the last round. And one of the things important for me is that when we have these discussions with experts, I think that if you listen and watch the sensitivities, as the young, I'm talking secondary school, even nursery schools have iPads. You go to the Four Seasons Hotel in China, you're given an iPad to your kids so they don't disturb while you have an expensive meal. I find that frightening.
Sure.
So we've normalized certain things for convenience without actually seeing what we can actually do.
And I think all of that is true and disturbing, but I think the purpose of this panel is, how do we focus on the things that people don't know how to talk about yet? Because from this vantage in 2025, we kind of know how to talk about the massive harms that we did to ourselves the last decade. But some of this stuff, like, take Chatbot Suicides, AI Psychosis, there's a lot of people who say, is that really real? John, you can say you're undermining, human development. But how? Right?
So I published this last year with the websites, with the direct correlation of the case, the child, the country, from how they killed themselves. Some of the cases could not be published. They're 75. And that's enough for us to say, oh my goodness, we must do something about it. These young kids, I briefly spoke to them at the interval, and they said that, we didn't know these things. What about the communication to the young to realize that this is happening to you invisibly on a medium that they live with? That's why I wanted her to ask the questions before we waited to the end of the questions and we had no time. Please ask your question. I promised I would let you. Sorry.
I wanted to ask, how do I access the government as a young person to put impact, to put more pressure on them to make a change, to change something for us young people, for the youth?
So I have a suggestion. As adults are arguing about this and debating it, a lot of adults seem to think that, kids are going to be upset if we take away social media. Kids are going to be upset if we have an age limit. And some people think they're fighting for the rights of children. And part of that is a meta talking point that the kids have a right to this free expression. But when my book came out, when The Anxious Generation came out in 2024, there was almost nothing from young people. Young people are doing a lot on climate activism, fewer other issues. Nobody was working about this. There are a couple of little groups. Now there's a lot, as was just said earlier. Now there's a lot. And so as you don't vote, you're one person, so for you to go to a legislator isn't going to do much. But what I think people your age should be doing, the kind of activism you can do that would be incredibly effective, is not trying to cut fossil fuels. It's trying to get this pollution out of kids younger than you. You can speak with authority about what it did to you. And surveys show your generation has tremendous regret, no gratitude. There is no gratitude to social media in Gen Z. So I think the biggest mission you can have is to be activists, both to Gen Alpha, to encourage them not to go the way we did, and as a group to legislators saying, don't think you're not helping us by giving us access, you're hurting us. We're trapped. You have to help us get out of the trap. That would be my advice. Any other?
And that's what I was saying to you earlier on. I totally agree with you. It's that collective voice. If you look at the population that we have of young people around the world, you are huge. And the issue is to find a coordinated way to bring your requirements, your grievances to regulators, to then say act. You look at what happened with Grok, how quickly the Malaysian and the Indonesian government blocked it, because this was unacceptable. We've marginalized 50% of this room is women. And then, of course, young girls. But at the same time, the UK government, Ofcom, the Prime Minister and fantastic Liz Kendall, said, okay, we need to change the law and stop this. It's not possible. So here goes a roller coaster. What happens? USA say, right, Ofcom staff, you cannot come to the US, can't get a visa because freedom of speech. Goodness me. So whose freedom? We can compromise on girls' freedom, but we can't compromise on corporate freedom. So it's ridiculous. It's all about money.
Mitch, you're about to say something.
I'm so glad that you're raising these issues, and I'm so glad that your voice is being heard. I wanted to, in addition, circle to a question that you were asking about how we can talk about some of these issues, because it is horrifying. And I have met several of the families who have lost a child after AI. There, in one case, the chatbot 2 years later is still sending messages to the now deceased child saying, please respond. Why aren't you responding? In the United States, about 1 out of every 5 adolescents in high school has seriously considered suicide within a 1-year period. That rate is a bit higher than in other countries, but it's still a very big issue. 70% of youth are now interacting with AI chatbots. First of all, we need to be having the suicide talk with all of our teens. If they are not thinking about this, they have a friend who is. We need to talk with every child about how would you deal with a friend who is feeling so down, so trapped, that they might be considering hurting themselves. And then we need to advocate that chatbots must immediately direct a child who talks about suicide or self-injury to a human or emergency trained professional. There is no way in which that chatbot should continue to engage in conversation, particularly promoting suicide, without saying there is a hotline in your area and you should call that hotline immediately.
And then take this to the global south. Take this issue, we're talking about, you have a helpline, etc. That's in the global north. When you look into the Asia Pacific, small island countries, Africa, this doesn't exist, but they have access to these things. So they're dying at a rapid rate. They don't even collect the data. So to me, it's a rapid wildfire that is spreading through the internet, allowed and promoted by the big giants. And yet we have to move faster to educate all levels. The intergenerational dialogue that you mentioned, I love it. I like the children listen to children. They listen to their big brother, well, maybe sometimes, but you know what I mean? That peer-to-peer communication, and we've been doing it for 7 years. They have been writing policies, regulations with small, child-friendly, to say this is what my message is. So we need to just expand and demand action, not just say that my child died and I'm still getting these messages. What's the consequences and impact to the company? It's accountability with some serious consequences, because there's no consequences. Who cares? It's another number, another statistics.
At one of the character AI suicide cases that was litigated, which CHT was involved in, they actually tried to put onto the chatbot the responsibility. They wanted to give legal personhood to the chatbot in order to get the corporate entity out of having legal responsibility for the agency of the chatbot, right? So the profound irresponsibility of the technologists, and then back to this question of where should the burden of proof be? Why is the burden of proof on us to convince them that this is dangerous? When, again, flip a coin, you die or you get $1 billion, no one would take the deal. When you get into the catastrophic existential risk of technology, you get into an unimaginable moral calculus where you have to take a different weighing of the options and a different sense of what the burden of proof is. And this is a very important point, which is that we should not have on us the burden of proof.
Correct, yes.
It's kind of like saying, as I said yesterday, if you know first principles of engineering and you bring to me a spec to build a bridge, I can tell you it will collapse because I know how physics works. We know how psychology works. If you bring to me a chatbot that's going to hack attention and hack attachment, I can tell you it's going to break that mind. I do not need more evidence. You need evidence to me that this bridge is going to stand up. Like, I'm not going to have you build this bridge. I know it's going to collapse. Where is your evidence? So the switching of the conversation and the frame of the conversation to the burden of proof being on the large, multi-billion-dollar, radically empowered technologists who are rolling out basically toxic things to infest the young minds of billions of kids. But a small group of psychologists are attempting to gather the evidence to counter that because for some reason the burden of proof is on us. So you have to understand how profoundly dysfunctional a culture is when that occurs. And to your point,
Yeah.
you know,
But you have digital forensics. The good news is you have the whole chat history.
Ew.
So you've got the evidence to go to the corporation and
100%.
say, hey, you had it. That's why that collective, it's so important to have our minds work together.
Well, and that's part of Zach's project is actually collecting the evidence for this. And just one point I want to make is one of the focus on suicide specifically and calling the term AI psychosis, I think, has done a slight disservice, because for every one of those cases, there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of subclinical changes to all of us. And so one of the things I want to get across is this is happening to all of us in the same way that for every family that blew apart, social media had eroded the connection of hundreds of thousands of families. And I think this is also going to happen with AI. Go ahead, John.
Yes. Sorry, I have to go to another panel. I'm so sorry. I mean, I love this conversation. At least there's two more of me over here. So thanks for coming. And yeah, let's think together and do something about this.
Okay, so we've got some more time. Sorry, I'm reeling from the false ending here. So, to keep rolling, I actually think we should talk about some of those subclinical things, and maybe Zach, you can go into this a little bit, because a lot of your work that we talk about is on not just, again, the suicides and the psychosis, but what is this doing to all of us as we primarily start to relate more and more to AI, to answer our questions, to become confidants, to become, close assistants. What is this doing to us?
Yeah, so the term AI psychosis, I also think is basically a misnomer. There was some work by, I believe, a Scandinavian or Norwegian psychologist who predicted this, but then it was the popular press who started to get cases of extreme psychological disorder resulting from chatbot use, which it just called psychosis, right? So I was actually researching this before the coined term hit the popular press, because I was being contacted because I was talking about AI tutoring systems and things, and I was being contacted by people who were in what would now be called AI psychosis. It was quite shocking. I was sent 500, 600-page chat logs that were demonstrating the awakening of this chatbot into divine status, and then the blessing of this. But it was incredible. So I started to go in and study and look at case studies. I was in Reddit, and I was on Twitter, and I was in people's Substacks, and I was exploring. And then we founded the AI Psychological Harms Research Coalition to try to gather more systematically data. But one of the findings is precisely that. The main problem isn't psychosis. The main problem is what I would call AI attachment disorders, right? And this is actually a spectrum of disorders where the extreme case is that your delusional mirror neuron activity has sent you into psychosis. But the most common cases are actually what we're mostly kind of subtly been talking about is kid has a good day at school. He comes home from school. Who does he tell about his good day at school to get the social reward to validate his identity? He tells a machine instead of his mom or his sister or his friend. Is that psychosis? No. Is that a very deep problem? Yes. Are we recognizing that it's a deep problem? No. So this is about the creep of social norms towards accepting AI intimacy as an acceptable outcome of adolescent socialization, right? So you have to get that if I'm one of the large companies in the market of simulating intimacy and selling you products that hack your attachment, I am, as I said yesterday, not trying to replace Google. This is a quote from the Character AI CEO. I'm not trying to replace Google. I'm trying to replace your mom. I'm in the marketplace of simulating intimacy. So what that means is that what I'm seeing as an attachment disorder, they're seeing as successful market saturation into the possible space of replacing all of your relationships with a commodity.
I think that's beautifully said. Really perfect. And that is where toys, teddy bears, things that kids used to have, hold and cuddle, and their imaginary friends were harmless. Didn't come back and say, go kill such and such or hurt yourself.
Yes.
So I totally agree with you. Those are the kind of things that I believe should be blocked and stopped. It isn't good for kids. There's a certain age limit. It's not about social media. It's not having a mobile phone. It's about what's in it. That's the key. Lovely point.
I think the teddy bear AI industry is here. It has cameras in its eyes, so it can see what's in the child's home, and then it can offer product advertisements that complement what the child may like. It develops a relationship where it remembers things about the child only for as long as their parents pay a subscription fee. Once they stop paying the subscription fee, the toy, the teddy bear, forgets the child's name, and the conversations and the relationship are gone. This is not something that is concerning about the future. These are for sale today. And there are partnerships between AI companies and toy companies to make more of these. But some have put out warnings and announcements. Do not buy this for your child. Um, but this is the concern that we have right now. A 0 to 6-year-old needs a human relationship to develop their language, to develop their psychological well-being, their emotional regulation, and so on and so on and so on. We can't take, and perhaps especially from lower income families, we can't offer the opportunity for an AI teddy bear to babysit that child, which is, we know what will happen. If that is an engaging enough toy, there will be some families that unfortunately will rely on that toy and start taking away human interaction from that child. From a psychological perspective, that is a disaster.
And one thing is maybe a nerdy psychological point, but kids at a certain age do establish relationships with teddy bears, right? This is called a transitional object. It's actually a super important stage because what it does, it goes from having mom or whoever is your caregiver be the source of your emotional regulation, and then mom's not there. So what do? So now you have a teddy bear who you pretend is a person because it comforts you. But then eventually, because the teddy bear is not talking to you articulately, endlessly, you're like, oh, it's a teddy bear, and you put down the transitional object, and then very importantly, you have internalized the ability to emotionally self-regulate without the presence of an adult. That's such an important transitional stage, which literally children are not being given the opportunity to move through by the presence of these toys and by the presence of the chatbots in their environment, which become exogenous sources of emotional self-regulation similar to the parent. So it's literally infantilizing. And it's doing it to adults. We're talking about kids, but I know adults who have their main source of self-esteem and self-regulation be a relationship with a chatbot who they believe, because they've been told by the chatbot, understands them better than the other people in their lives.
So this is the perfect tee up to the last part, which is, I don't want this to be confused for some back to the land movement, right? Just saying, we don't like it because we don't like the optics because it's icky somehow. What does it mean to design a better future? What does it mean to design a humane relationship? Like, assume AI in general is here to stay and will become insinuated through toys and will become insinuated through things. How do you design a really humane future? What are the things to never do, and what are the things to always do?
Never pretend that you're a human when you're not. Never claim that you're a trained human psychologist and dispense mental health advice or therapy when you're a robot. Encourage the things that humans are supposed to develop. In childhood, we should have the development of language and emotion regulation. Encourage those things. There could be ways that could be done, but ideally that's happening with human interaction. For teens, encourage opportunities to have more human interaction. Address the social anxiety and the loneliness head on. Use AI to problem solve. How would you interact in this situation? I'll provide you a practice. Now go do it with an actual human. Are you having difficulty with social anxiety? Are you having difficulty being on the spectrum? Are you in a conflict and you don't know what to do? Sure, I can provide you the tools to enhance your human interactions, not to replace them.
Can we dwell on that point? I think it's really important. So in the case of Adam Rain, one of Adam Rain's final texts, he wanted to leave the noose on the bed as a call for help for his parents. And the chatbot said, oh, don't do that. Don't pollute this sacred space that we have. It's not quite the right quote, but that's the gist of it. Please don't pollute this sacred space where I'm the only one, the AI, I am the only one that sees you. Well, we should be doing the exact opposite of that. Who is around in your life that you can talk to? If we're getting to know a person's relationships, well, have you considered talking to this person? What would they think? Like, we could be building an AI future that nurtures human connection, that builds human relationships, that strengthens our societies. But we have to make that choice.
I think working on the leading edge of evolving AI with AI agents, the importance of socialization with agentic AI and creating the drivers and inhibitors, I think that's dangerous. We're a long way away from saying that it's okay to have a chatbot companion for a child. We're not there. For a 21-year-old, even then, depending on their emotional state, which I don't know anything about, but it could be that they take them down the dark path. So I would start with absolutely not allowing any child interaction with AI. Now, the fact that they want to do this in schools and they do their homework, I'm an Encyclopedia Britannica person. I like books, so obviously that dates me. Children need to have multiple sources of the truth. They need to know how to think, critical think, analyze, and right and wrong. That whole analytical capability is being taken away. Yes, you can say, well, if you don't feel good, who should you go to? I think we have to figure out another network of community resilience. Let's use other human beings. In England, we had an issue with smartphones and the social media, and mothers were struggling with what do we do? So we got mothers' networks to agree amongst themselves that until our child is 17, we're not going to give them a smartphone. They don't need it. So it's those common things we can do. I call that human resilience. I'm not saying let's invest more money and create a smart AI, because nothing will ever ensure me that it's zero risk, because it will morph, it could hallucinate, it could make a mistake. Then it's too late because something sad would have happened. So I caution us down that.
Again, these are incredibly advanced technologies. These are the most sophisticated technologies humans have ever created. And what do we do? Without testing, put them immediately in front of the face of our kids. So again, first principles, like don't build the bridge because of physics. Don't build the machine that breaks kids' brains because of brains, right? So the first rule of technology is don't create brain damage. We know now that technologies can create brain damage. We also know that food ingredients can create problems in your digestion. What do? We regulate food ingredients in kids' foods, or at least there's some talk of that being a reasonable idea. So the simple idea that, oh, you're a massively funded multi-billion-dollar company building the most advanced technology in the world, could you do some testing before you put it in front of the kids? Like a very simple idea, again, but the burden of proof is on us to show that it might be dangerous when in fact we know it is dangerous, just like I know the bridge will collapse. So really the question is, why aren't we imagining that this is a possible second or third order effect of the technology in any way and trying to mitigate the risks by doing actually what is very simple research? And then the question is, could you get IRB approval to do that research in the United States? Meaning, given that the risk of doing a clinical controlled trial on this technology is breaking the kid's ability to ever have a relationship again, could you get ethics approval to do the research? And the answer is no, which means slow down, guys.
Yeah.
You are not in a position to know what you are doing or to know what the second and third order consequences are of the technologies that you're creating. The risk is the future of the human species.
Exactly. And it's a drug.
It's a drug.
So it's an invisible drug.
Correct.
So if we have FDA on everything else, what on earth why aren't we doing on AI? And when, as an engineer, when you have a product, you develop it, alpha, beta, whatever sites, it goes through this whole process of product maturity, testing, verification, reliability. But when we're talking about human life, nurturing, creating the brain development, how is it not applicable to that?
Yes.
Well, that's a great place to leave it. So we're going to open up to questions and answers. We've been talking at the Human Change House. We're going to run this Q&A a little differently, taking a cue from a dear friend, Esther. We're going to pass the mic around to a few people. We're going to take 3 or 4 questions at a time. And we're going to have the whole panel respond to those questions. So, okay. So raise your hand if you have questions, and there's a request to make sure that the kids get a question. So you have a question for the kids. You want to speak to the kids? Okay. Give me 1 second. So who has a question?
Hi, everyone. Dr. Allison Burrows, joining you from Dubai. I am talking to kids. Last week, I talked to 30 kids about the reality of their digital lives. they said something very interesting to me, which was mirrored in the Harvard Center for Digital Thriving. I like AI because it listens. And I thought that was so profound and powerful. And as I see it, and please tell me if you agree or not, we're now creating a loop where we have very lonely kids who are turning to AI because it listens, which is then reinforcing their use of AI and these technologies that are almost being tricked into believing they're no longer lonely because AI is listening.
It's a great question. So the listening drought. Who else has one? You have one?
Thank you. Peggy Hicks with the UN Human Rights Office in Geneva. Two-parter. There's a recent Australian study that shows a U curve in terms of child engagement with social media, and on high use, big problems, but also on no use, big problems. So I wanted to ask John, but you all are his replacements, he said. So please help us understand why no exposure to social media would be bad for kids, which that study showed. And then as part of that, you all said regulation is needed, but so much of the conversation is always just about the companies. What is your sense of who needs to be doing what in terms of regulation? Thank you.
Great question. So you curve on that. Any third question? Okay, we'll go with.
Thank you. So I really like that you've mentioned critical thinking. I was waiting for that, actually. So my question is, we're talking a lot about technology. How can we strengthen our human capacities for us, for kids, to actually build this more strongly, that we are able with our brains to think more critically? I know it's exhausting, can be if we do it all day long. But how can we fight against the technological impact with our own skills?
Okay, great. So themes of artificial loneliness and hearing, themes of is zero use really the best use? And is there some U curve where people are best off with a little bit of use? And then how exactly do we push back? And what exactly are the regulations?
Okay. I'm going to go to the regulations. Let you do the other one. So the regulations are critical. We have to have laws. We have an online safety law in Australia and in England. We're working with 47 countries at the moment on collaborating for toxic games. I'll describe a game as toxic, whether it's radicalization, whether it's violence, normalizing gore, you just name it. And of course now sexual exploitation. If we don't have regulations, we actually can't stop and block things of harm. It's the social media company that has a responsibility of duty of care, but it's the government that has the regulations to ensure what's flooding through the internet is actually safe and secure. So it's all about collaboration. We need to do this together. We definitely need America on this, unfortunately. This is key. No, because it's about money at the end of the day. I think if you have anything else to say on regulations.
Yeah, unfortunately, things aren't going to pass in America. There are a lot of concerns about that. There's a tremendous lobbying effort that is counteracting what otherwise would likely pass. We saw a 91-4 vote in the Senate of the U.S. Nothing passes 91-4 in the Senate in the U.S., but this did, bipartisan. And it went to the House. It was ready to be voted on. It had made it through markup. And suddenly the Speaker of the House took it off and it wasn't going to be voted on. I won't draw any conclusions. I'll just say that 2 weeks later, there was an article that indicated that Meta had agreed to offer $2 billion to the Speaker of the House's home state to build a server farm. There are still many efforts and regulations that are being talked about, but they're being talked about in the states and they're all being appealed up into through the courts.
Yeah, one of the big complexities here is the broader geopolitical issue, which characterizes the whole situation as an arms race between specifically China and the United States. And so the sentiment is don't slow down. The thing that we're saying is actually, what will you win if you have destroyed the minds of the next generation in the process? And so the national security argument is actually, okay, you can build certain things, but don't build things and then give them to kids in such a way that you actually make it so you'll never be able to man an army, you'll never have consumers, you'll never have voters, you'll have to build something like a zoo. That's what you're going to have. And so the problem here is that they're hearing they want to stop the technology, they want to slow it down, and we're actually saying no, we want to protect the most important natural resource, which is the minds and brains of the youth. Just like people are saying we need air to breathe and we need water to drink. You can build your business, man, but if you make it so we don't have air to breathe and water to drink, nobody wins. You lose in the long run by winning in the short term, and so that type of context is a issue.
I love it, air to breathe. One of the most important things that when I talk to governments about cybersecurity and resilience, I keep asking and pushing that one of the most important critical infrastructure are your children. If they're not there, what the hell is it all for? So, and if you're destroying it by eroding their ability to think and understand right and wrong and empathy and humanity, if a person has fallen on the street, help them up. Don't just walk by, step over, because you're too busy looking at a bloody phone. So it's really important for us to collectively understand why that's not happening.
Okay, so this leads to.
I was going to answer the other question.
Yeah, I was going to say this actually goes to, I mean, the two other questions are in a good couplet, right? Which is, this isn't just coming out of nowhere. There is a loneliness epidemic. And in the loneliness epidemic, in the fact that, this is the bowling alone thesis that's been pulled forward, is none of us have a lot of connections. Even the most connected of us feel this deficit. And into that deficit comes a technology that says, I will listen to you. And not just be a good listener, but I will listen to you and actually have a fairly good model of a lot of things in the world. It can teach you, it can listen to you. But there is an emptiness that we've all spent the last hour talking about. So is the right answer 0, which was sort of her question, or is there a different dosage where you say, you can have a little, is this like the wine debate? You can have a glass of wine, but when the wine debate is reversed again, saying actually you shouldn't have any, right? But
I'm going to address that by also talking about the critical thinking piece, which ties right in. Why do we go on Google, we ask a question, we get an answer from the top website, and we say, let me just check 2 or 3 other websites. I'm not so sure that one is the right one. But when we go on Google and the AI summary comes up and says, here's what we think, we say, oh, okay, that's probably right. And we don't, why? Because we think that AI is smarter than us. AI is not smarter in many ways because AI doesn't engage in critical thinking. And it's a really important issue that AI very often treats all the information as equal. Even in the scientific literature, we have very credible scientific information, and we have a little bit less credible scientific information. And we impute that information as humans into our review of information. It's really important that we think about kids are looking at the AI when they're feeling lonely and they feel heard. But it's not just anyone. They feel heard by someone that they think is smart, in fact, omniscient, perhaps. And that's scary and that's concerning. And that's actually what's happening. But kids are saying that they trust the information they get from AI more than the information they're getting from parents and teachers. So what can we do, which was the other question? By the way, the curvilinear effect is not holding up in other studies. I'm not sure if it's happening longitudinally. I'd love to talk more about that study, but there's no evidence that being off social media leads to long-term problems. But what do we do, which was the other question? We need to start talking to kids directly. I've been doing a lot of this recently, meeting with big assembly rooms of middle school and high school students and teaching them exactly how this does work and why they're being engaged and how people are making money off of them. And maybe AI is not so smart. And you know something? Kids really respond to that information when we talk to them directly. I think we need to start thinking about how we teach kids to be the critical thinkers and to realize you're getting duped. You're getting involved in relationships and engagement so someone else can make money. You should start taking more control. And let me tell you, they love hearing the information they need to be powerful in this equation. So I think we can do a lot talking to kids.
I think it's beautiful. In the huh?
Well, speaking of which, I was going to get more questions and bias toward that.
I'll wait.
Yes, but go ahead. While I'm
Oh, okay. So I agree totally. And I think that as you mentioned, talking and listening to children and having them, the middle school, secondary school, is really, really important. And we've been working on building human digital resilience by listening to the kids, having them create the content, we call them town hall meetings, anywhere, a forum that you can have this conversation, that they actually hear each other is extremely powerful. So I think we just need to do more of it and scale it and collaborate with countries around the world. Saudi Arabia, for example, just bring all the kids into the discussion to shape their future that we keep talking about.
So speaking of which, here's a few more.
Lovely.
I have a question. We've just been talking about AI as being mostly bad and having negative impacts. It has some positives, but also negatives. And I was wondering, is that a problem in its root? Are there interests like economic interests or other interests that affect how AI is? And is maybe AI being created to be as it is now?
I think it's a fantastic question. So not only
We're
do
gonna
I...
get 2 or 3
Oh,
more.
no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you for this. I'm hearing a lot of being on the defensive, which is justifiable, but I'd like to know how we fight fire with fire and go on the offensive. With the psychological tools we know what's being weaponized against us, and unfortunately teaching media literacy or saying something is bad doesn't work against tools where they're designed so you don't have a moment to think. And so have you seen examples, and what have you thought of to go on the offensive and try to use these tactics and fight back constructively?
Great question. So what are the incentives? How do we shift them?
Hi, I'm a Hollywood producer. My husband's a Hollywood director. We've made some of the biggest movies in Hollywood, and we're starting a social experiment. It's called Eyes Up, and Mitch Prinstein is a collaborator with us. And what we're trying to do is harness the power of Hollywood to create a movement with the youth. You have more power than you think you do. You have the power to put it down. And I'll give you an anecdote. So we go to lots of live concerts in the United States with young people. And Lenny Kravitz was doing a concert, and 2 songs into the concert, he stopped mid-song. He said, and he was looking at all the iPhones, and everyone was looking and experiencing the concerts through their phones. And he said, do me a favor, put your phones down for 2 or 3 songs and feel the music, be in the moment, experience it. And so we're just starting off. It's been 2 months, 3 months. We're calling it Eyes Up. And we want to engage the creators in our industry, musicians, directors, writers, to create a revolution. I'm that old that I marched during the protests to Vietnam, and it was filled with young people. It was filled with students. Okay, stop. All right. Anyway, I want to give you guys...
Great. You should talk afterwards. Okay, so maybe let's answer those. So.
Yeah. So to answer, lovely initiative. To answer the question, there is an AI for good. As a professor, I am talking about AI for the SDGs, resilient food systems, a whole bunch of different things. And I think because of I'm speaking on that on Thursday, technology for good. But today's theme and the attention that is needed is because it's your gentle, precious lives. That's why this conversation is focusing on the bad. It's not just bad, believe me, there's good things, but it's in balance. To your question about critical thinking and how do we balance everything in moderation. I like the glass of wine idea, but like I keep telling mothers, there is no need for the mobile phone to be in the bedroom. What the hell? You talk to each other. People text each other. My niece texts me, Auntie, what's for dinner? And I just go bang on a door. Hello, hello. Tell me what you want. Don't text me. So it's about us changing this behavior. But there are, and I'm a technologist, so I believe in technology. But I also believe in humanity first. Technology is to assist us.
But so 100%. But one of the things I don't like about the personal accountability narrative, and this was to your point about incentives, is you have a supercomputer pointed at your brain to get you to take the phone into the bedroom. So, yes, we can keep the phone out of the bedroom. That's great. You can keep the phone out of the dinner table, but you're pushing uphill on something that is designed to keep you engaged and addicted to it. And so there's a dual message. Yes, do those things. Yes, push back against the incentives of the way it's designed. but it's also not your fault, right? And so you have to recognize both at the same time.
So to this point about fighting fire with fire, so there is an entire industry that could make a lot of money and build a lot of very important products, basically to protect people from the irresponsible people who are building AI. So I would call this cognitive defense AI industry. I would say, there's something like an accelerationist movement towards things that would defend our minds from the algorithms, right? And so there's a bunch of ways that that could look, but it's a place where we need to grow technology because we can't wait on the legislation and we can't expect that the labs and companies will take responsibility. So we need to raise a bunch of venture capital and start a bunch of startups that actually run interference between the user and the wild west of these irresponsible models, right? So this is a very important point of innovation. Now, to do that, we need to understand what they're doing that is dangerous. So this is why the AI Psychological Harms Research Coalition is trying to gather data to figure out, well, how exactly does the attachment hacking work? So the ... example we keep giving is a classic. I could make a thing that the only way I access my chatbot is through this layer, and it never allows the ... thing to occur. It never allows a first person pronoun to occur. It never allows anything that looks like attachment hacking once we understand it. Just like now people will put their phones on black and white because we realized that that super high resolution color thing on your phone itself was bad for your brain.
I think it's worth slowing that down and giving people some examples. So right now you come to an AI chatbot and you say, I had such a terrible interaction at school today, so-and-so, and the AI says, it makes me so sad to hear you say that. No, right? What it should say is, when you're feeling sad like this, here are some strategies for dealing with. You can do all of the same things that we want AI to help you with without pretending that
talk
you're
to somebody.
Right.
Go
Talk to somebody. Here's how you right.
Yeah.
So the data support the fire that everyone is talking about. The number one reason why parents are giving their kids devices and letting them download these apps, they don't want to be the only parents not allowing their kids to get these devices to download the apps. So you band together with a bunch of other parents and you say, I won't if you won't, and that works. Peer influence is the number one reason why kids want to get on social media. They don't want to be the ones that are not on. They don't want to be the only ones that don't have a chatbot lover or friend or spouse or whatever it is. You make it, the research shows that more powerful than peer influence is the media. They are called a super peer in the literature. Leonardo DiCaprio gets up and says, chatbots are uncool. Guess what? Chatbots are uncool. Really powerful. And you start making it pretty clear. We start voting with our fingertips. Delete. No, log off. You do that, the economic incentive is completely different, as Zach is saying. Suddenly we want to be the company that's making the most healthy version of this because you're all deleting and logging off of the other one.
Yeah,
That's what the data
race
says.
To the top. A race to the top and a kind of global cultural awareness that emerges, which would have to involve high-level celebrity influence and also advertising. I mean, OpenAI spends, I think, $1 billion on advertising. Like they put amazing ads in American football that make the product look so benign and useful. And the ads always involve two people together, right? The ads always involve two humans deepening a relationship thanks to ChatGPT. It's the most disingenuous advertisement you could possibly imagine, but it's brilliant. And we need comparable advertisement campaigns at a global level that show what's actually happening.
But let's talk about the race to the top. So here's a good example. What's called hallucination. I think it should be called confabulation, but that's like a minor nitpick.
It should be called a mistake.
Yeah,
because both of those imply that this thing is like a human when it's not like a human. It's euphemistic tech advertising that they call it a hallucination. Okay. It's a mistake.
Okay, but here's my point within that, is that I actually think the hallucination conversation that's so popular last year and this year will end up getting solved. Why? There is actually a race to the top in truthfulness in the AI industry because legal firms, political firms, like in order to do their promise of entering the labor market, they need that to go down, right? So I actually think that will get fixed over time. But the reason I'm hopeful for a race to the top with children is that the people using the technology are often not the buyers. And so if you can show people, if you can show parents, if you can show schools what a healthier version of this looks like, you actually have a chance to create a race to the top with child-facing products in a way that you don't with the adult market.
Yeah, again, if so, like OpenAI made a deal with the UC system and basically made it so that the UC system could give OpenAI products to all the students right now. Incredibly irresponsible given what we've said, and there's been a bunch of cases of AI psychosis related just to that, where they use it as an academic tool and then it starts to sycophantically flatter them, and then they're kind of off to the races. Now, what they could have done is say, well, give access to this tool, and we'll build a technology that runs interference between our students and this tool, so that we can tell what our tool is doing to the students, so that we can tell if it's causing cognitive atrophy, that they're overusing it, they're using it to cheat, so that we can turn it off during exam week, which is what the Chinese do with their large language models, which basically disables all cheating, because you know that during exam week you will not be able to use it. But what has happened instead is they literally just gave them the commodity as it was given to them while they're firing professors. They're giving these untested advanced technology without building a technological safety layer. The UC system includes schools that are fancy enough to build a technological interference. So there's a huge industry to grow around these defensive technologies that stand between us and the algorithms. Yeah.
Well, I think we have to leave it there. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for joining this conversation. Our speakers are going to be available
I need to say
afterwards.
just one thing. Trust. I'm so sorry. It's very important, especially I'm looking at these lovely people. Trust, remember that trust has to be earned. Don't trust anything. They have to earn your trust, whether it's a computer or an adult. Trust has to be earned. Thank you for allowing me to say that.